Are you ready? The Kornelia Stephanie Show. Wake up to love, your call to action. Join Kornelia as she empowers others to live heaven on earth. Kornelia teaches listeners how to be the authority over yourself, embracing your inner guru. Feel yourself uplifted into limitless expansion, integrating ease and grace in a changing world. This show will cover topics such as unconditional love, your physical body, how to be in extraordinary relationships, create financial and emotional wealth, embracing entrepreneurship in the new earth.
Welcome to the Kornelia Stephanie Show. Wake up to love, global galactic actions for a new earth. Today's show, I'm so excited for today's show. I have a very special guest on, Charleen Hess, and we're going to be talking about going from chaos to love, using your life's obstacles to bring you into wholeness. Welcome back to the show, Charleen.
Thank you so much, Kornelia. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to do this show with you today, but I want to tell the people a little bit more about you and what it is that you do. So you're a personal trainer, you're a fitness instructor, you're a hairdresser, and you're a wholeness life coach.
Yes.
Right? And so you do a lot of different things. And so we're going to be diving into all of the things that you do. And what makes this show so special is because it's hard to believe after we talk about everything that you've had to overcome in your life, overcoming every obstacle that life could throw at you from childhood well on into adulthood, and how you were raised in a abusive home that was an addictive household as the 13th child. And you had to overcome all forms of child abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. And you're going to share with us your story about how you had to fight obesity and how you had to fight addiction and workaholism. And now to live your life in freedom, wholeness, and balance, and coaching other people to be able to do the same thing. And that's what makes this so special, because you and I, we share a lot of the same background, except for I wasn't raised as a 13th child. I have no idea what that would be like. And so that's where I would like to start today. I want to start with, what is it like to be the 13th child? And what was that like growing up in that household for you when you were a child?
I think that's a question that I get asked a lot. Having such a huge family. My mother gave birth to 13 children. My father had 3 children from his previous marriage. So there were 16 of us total. And I grew up in a house that was about 1,500 square feet with 14 to 16 people in it at a time. And so it was very, very chaotic. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby. So by the time I was born, my eldest sibling had already moved out. And it was very chaotic. A lot of people have this imagination of the movie Cheaper by the Dozen. And they're like, oh, was it like that? And it's like, not even close. So like you had said, I grew up in a very abusive and addictive household. My mother was an alcoholic. My father was a compulsive gambler. And I was pretty much raised by my siblings. I have very few memories of interacting with my mother or my father directly. And there was a lot of chaos and a lot of dysfunction. And I think the overall feeling that I had often growing up was feeling afraid and feeling like I wanted to hide. At the same time, when you're a child, you're so playful and expressive, and the world has so much wonder. And I feel like I was able to hold on to that, interacting with my siblings. And I am very close to my siblings and I love them very much, but we do not interact very often. I live 2,500 miles away from that area that I grew up in. But it was very busy, very chaotic, and like you had mentioned earlier, every type of dysfunction that you can imagine. And so I grew up feeling, like I said, the overarching feeling was afraid, feeling like I wanted to be small, always walking on eggshells, wanting to hide. But knowing that in my core of who I am in the center of my being is so open and expressive, I had this tug of war going on often of trying to hide because I don't want to be seen. I don't want to cause any commotion or draw attention, but at the same time wanting to express this inner joy and exuberance for life that I had, as most children do.
It just blows me away, Charleen, our similarity, because we both had parents that were emotionally unavailable to us. So you had a mother that was an alcoholic and you had a father that was a gambler. And both of your parents were acting emotionally, suppressing that emotion and acting on their emotion. And so that's what was going on at that time. And then when we look at your parents and we think about your mother's mother, and we think about your father's father, and we think about that lineage, how it goes back, and all of the things that you've had to overcome, and just what a tremendous, because there was no one that was really there for you emotionally. Mm-hmm. Your siblings raising you, they had the same parents.
Yes.
They had the same parents, and so that, right?
Yeah, they were in just as much chaos and they were feeling just as much fear and as I was. And so we all just kind of banded together doing the best that we could, loving and supporting each other. And, the thing with abuse is the way that it works is it's handed down, like you talked about, from generation to generation. So the abuse, my parents were abused, which made them abuse their children and then their children to their children. And it's just this lineage that continues on and on and on until somebody stops the cycle, until that cycle is broken and then it no longer continues. And that is where I feel like my siblings and we were the last generation where we have stopped the cycle. I own my feelings. I own where I'm at so that I'm not projecting onto my children or the people around me, because I've gained that emotional healthiness. I've gained that awareness to know when I am acting out of consciousness, where I know where I'm at and I'm coming from a place of my heart, or I'm actually acting out of chaos.
So again, this is such a big piece, because that emotional component plays such a huge piece, because there was nobody emotionally available to you. So basically, if even as a child, you had to decide early on that you were not going to go down that same road because of what you were witnessing and what you were seeing in your mother, in your father, in your siblings. You had to choose early on not to become an alcoholic, not to become a person that's going to act on their emotions and overeat, not to become a drug addict. You had to fight this emotional tsunami all the time when you were growing up as a little kid. And so you didn't have the time and space that most children, I shouldn't say most, because there's a lot of people that are like us that have had to overcome the chaos from early childhood. But there's also a lot of people that had really good upbringings and that had parents that were both there for them, and where their emotional needs, the child's emotional needs, was being met. And so you had to clearly choose from an early on child to be your own parent already as a kid. Mm-hmm. Because you had already, and I think that's what I see in you even still today, where it's a driving force within you, that there isn't going to be anything that's going to stop you from overcoming any challenge that life throws at you. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that growing up in a chaotic household, one of the gifts that comes from that is the ability to take any situation or any circumstance that you're in and to immediately react. Because there isn't time to think about it. There isn't time to contemplate. Sometimes situations are thrown at you and you have to make a decision right away. And so I learned how to make, they say make lemonade out of lemons. And so there are a lot of gifts that I have about because of growing up in that chaos. So although it was very hard and I did not have any emotional support and I did not have anyone to guide me, what it did teach me is it taught me the ability to rely upon myself. It taught me to dig in to find that there's something inside of me that needs to be able to meet those needs. It also gave me an incredible amount of compassion, that I am able to really, truly have that empathy for people, regardless of what life circumstance that they're in. Because the abuse that I suffered was only part of growing up in an abusive home, but the abuse that you watch somebody that you love suffer has a far greater impact on you. And so because I was in that and I saw my mother being beaten, I saw my siblings being beaten. There were, hospital visits and, the PE teacher in gym class calling children's services because we show up for PE with bruises, and having that whole experience and feeling like there's something wrong with you, and you don't realize that not everybody in the world has the same life. It probably wasn't until I was in maybe older grade school, more like probably 6th grade, that I got to spend the night at a girlfriend's house. And I just thought their family was so odd. They were so quiet, and nobody was yelling at each other. And they all, it was just so strange to me how they interacted. And I think it was at that moment that I realized, I think that my family is different. And they, it was just this really great experience of having that first opportunity of seeing myself from the outside rather than just being in it. And I think it was at that point when I made the decision that I don't think that I want to continue in the way that my family is interacting. I want something different. I like the idea of, calm conversations. I like the idea of being able to interact in a way that doesn't feel scary, that you don't have to feel afraid. And so I began my journey of looking inward at myself, like the observer looking in, probably around that time.
That's incredible. It's just an incredible innate ability that you've developed and strengthened over the years. Mm-hmm. And because of the work that you've done, and because of this skill set that you've developed as a survivor, and moving beyond that, no matter what, that you weren't going to have a life like that. Mm-hmm. Your children also are now free from, because you have 2 children. You have Austin and you have Seja, and they're both adults now, right? Yes. And it's because of the work that you've done that they don't have that same model. Mm-hmm. That same model. Yes. And so what a blessing that is, that you broke that cycle.
Yes.
That's incredible. And when we look at this whole thing with your parents, so where are you with your parents today? Like, where are you with tell us about your dad. And I know that your mom's not with us anymore, but tell us about how you feel about your parents today.
I absolutely love them so deeply, and I have so much love and compassion for both of them. There was a time when I'd moved 2,500 miles away, and I would every year, once a year, go back to see my family, and just walking into the same room with my father, I wanted to vomit. I had so much emotion and anger and hatred in my heart for him because he was truly a monster. He was a monster in my growing up years. And although he is a recovering addict, and he is very involved in Gamblers Anonymous, and he has really come a long way, and had at that time, I still had not yet been able to come to that place of true forgiveness, because his personality is still the same. He's not acting out in the same way, but he's still a very bold, outspoken, vulgar, bossy person. It's just his personality. But I no longer see him as the monster that I saw him as growing up. And that road of forgiveness took 4 years. specifically, I remember every year I would go and I would see him, and he would come in the room and he would go to hug me, and my body would just freeze, and I would like brace for this hug. And then I would leave and think, okay, I've got to forgive him. And then I would work on it for the whole year. And the next year I would go back and I would see him again. And I'd be like, okay, I think I've forgiven him. And he would come in the room and he would go to hug me, and the same thing. I just would freeze and brace and be like, ugh, I can't stand this human. And it took me several times until finally the piece that changed was that I was able to voice to him all of the hurt. I wrote him a letter. And when I wrote it at the time, I didn't know if I was going to send it or not. It was just an exercise of writing out every single act and how it made me feel, and how it was, what it was like to watch him beat my mother, and what it was like to be in that situation of having that kind of intense violence and anger and rage. And I almost had like a PTSD from it. And so I wrote this letter and I ended up giving it to him. And I cannot tell you the healing that came from that, and the forgiveness, because I finally came to the point to where I realized that forgiveness comes from within inside of you. And you don't need somebody to tell you, I'm sorry, to be able to forgive them. You can actually forgive somebody who's not sorry for what they did. And when I came to that realization that forgiveness, there's this really wonderful saying, and I don't remember who said the quote, but it said, choosing not to forgive somebody, holding a grudge, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I remember hearing that and thinking how profound that was about how unforgiveness poisons us. And so when I came to that place of forgiveness, and it touched my father so deeply, he took it and he actually has read it out loud to all of the people at his Gamblers Anonymous meetings of, this is the life that I had. This was the monster that I was, that my daughter wrote this letter to me. And then here I am today, that I can have a relationship with my daughter, that she can love me and forgive me. And so he uses it as his transformation. And so it was this really beautiful piece. But it gave me, growing up in a family like that, gave me the ability to have a compassion. And it really taught me that there is no judgment. And I think that's a really big piece, is that when you feel all of your emotions, the need to judge no longer exists.
That's exactly true. That's absolutely true. When you feel all of your feelings, there's no need to judge anything. And it's brilliant because how you said that, you took the years every time you would go back and you would see your dad, and you'd see if you were deeper at a place of forgiveness. And when you finally had forgiven, really, truly forgiven, to see that everything that was happening between you and your father was lessons learned, and was opportunities for you to move into wholeness yourself.
Absolutely.
And it was opportunities for you to claim your worth, to claim your value, to release abandonment, to release betrayal. And these were all opportunities that your father clearly demonstrated in showing you, I've abandoned you, I've betrayed you, you are not worthy because I'm not here for you, I'm not showing up for you. Mm-hmm. And so these are all emotional core wounds that we've worked through. And it's brilliant because you're on the other side of these emotional core wounds. And that's part of what living in wholeness is all about. And so when we look at the situation of how traumatic and how chaotic your upbringing was, and the compassion that you have to have for yourself and your perpetrator.
Right.
Exactly. And I just want to give a lot of kudos to your dad. And the reason why is because it takes a really big, humble heart. Your dad had to take a whole lot of humility to be able to say, I did this to my daughter. Mm-hmm. I did this to my daughter. And not every experience works out like that, because I tried to do the same thing with my mother, and wanting this exchange that you had with your dad with my mom. And my mom wouldn't accept it. She couldn't accept it because she, on some level, I think that she could not accept it, because then that that would be too much guilt for her to process, too much for her to take. And so the compassion I had to have is that she's just not there. She did the best she could. She loves me, and I forgive her, and I love her because, again, it helped me move into the person that I am today. And so, and my belief is that we chose our parents. And so I chose my mother, and I chose these experiences that I can overcome and that, transcend and move beyond and move back into wholeness. So what about your mom?
So my mother, it's a different experience because I always saw my mother as the victim. And so I never held her accountable for her abuse. I never held her accountable because I always thought she was the victim. And so I felt sorry for her. So when she had completely abandoned me, she literally left and never came home. I was 12 years old. There were 6 of us siblings left that still lived in the house. And I came home from school one day and she wasn't there. And I probably didn't see her for at least 2 weeks before I saw her face again. I didn't know if she was dead or alive. I had no idea. And I just kept feeling sorry for her because she really had a miserable life. She just went from one abusive husband to another abusive husband. She lost her first child when she was 20 years old. She lost her 7th child when he was 9. She just really suffered so much, and she did not know how to feel and how to process her emotions. She just kept having more and more children and just trying to cope with the abuse and the aggression and the violence that was in my home. But at the same time, I never held her accountable. And so because I didn't hold her accountable, I didn't get a chance to really experience and heal that wound with her, that wound of abandonment, because I ignored it. I forgave it before I experienced it. I just dismissed it. And dismissing and forgiving are 2 completely different things. And so it wasn't until many years later where I finally came to the place where I was willing to hold my mother accountable. And it was really hard because right at that time where I was ready to say, Mom, I need to talk to you. I'm really hurt. I need to share with you about the abandonment and how this has played out in my life. She got dementia.
No, she did.
And
wow.
yes.
No.
And so the last 3 years of her life, she had pretty progressive dementia. Every year it got a little bit worse. And so it was at that time that I gave myself permission to not talk to her because it was like reopening that wound, and I needed to go inside and heal first. And so that's what I did. And so in that time that I chose not to talk to her was the time that her dementia got really bad. And so I never had that opportunity to tell her. I never had that opportunity to work through it like I did with my dad, where I could have somebody look back at me and give me feedback. And it was shortly after that she died. And I remember feeling like I had this choice. I could feel really bad and feel all this guilt because I stopped talking to her before she got dementia. So I never got to have that chance. I never got to have that relationship. And now, I can't have the relationship because her dementia is so progressed, and I can't have that conversation, and then she's gone. And I remember the moment that she died, I was on the phone with my whole family, and she was in the room and she'd passed. And my family and I have very different ideas and views about what happens after you die. And they still hold on to the religious view of it, and I hold on more to the spiritual understanding. That I feel like it was after that my mother passed that I had this absolute total understanding of who she was, and I just had so much love and forgiveness in my heart for her, even though she never got to say I'm sorry. And I know with all of my being that she's sorry, and I know that she acted exactly out of the knowledge, of the wisdom, and the capability that she had. And I just see her as such an amazing, beautiful woman. And I see her in me a lot since she's passed, even more so than when she was alive. It's like I feel her in me. I feel her coming out of me in her expressiveness. And I see a part of her that I now embrace and love and have completely forgiven.
And I love that because that's how you feel about yourself. And now you're actually having a relationship with your mother that you never had before because you're having this this absolute freedom to see her beauty, to see your beauty, to transcend this energy within your family lineage. And thank you so much for doing that work. And I can only imagine your mother's dementia, the emotional suppression that took place in her physical body. If I looked it up, it probably, that's the organ where the emotional suppression took place, that it went in the body and ended up causing disease over years and years and years and years and years after the alcoholism. And it was a shutdown, a complete shutdown.
Right.
More thinking, no more wanting to think about anything, just shutting the whole brain down, shutting it down, because it was all too much.
Right.
Wonderful story and very inspiring, Charleen. We're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk more about how you went from chaos to love. We're going to dive deeper into your dysfunctional marriage that you had for, I don't know, how long were you married? 13 years?
We were together for 19 years.
19 years. You were together for 19 years. We'll talk more about this after break. We'll be right back. Everyone, welcome back. You're listening to the Kornelia Stephanie Show, Wake Up to Love, Global Galactic Actions of a New Earth. And one of the global galactic actions of a new earth is how we're going from chaos to love. And I'm with my very special guest, Charleen Hess, and we're talking about overcoming chaos and moving into love. And so before break, Charleen, we were talking about how you were in a dysfunctional marriage for 19 years. And tell us a little bit more about that.
So growing up in a family like I did and feeling that need to have calmness, like I told you when I spent the night at my girlfriend's house and I'd heard a conversation and there was no anger and yelling. And I was like, whoa, what is that? I started becoming very capable. So I wanted to prove that I was not like my family. I had this different idea, this different mindset. I had this different view of what a family looked like. And so I knew what I didn't want to be. And so I started to become very, very, very capable and functional. When I was going to school, like I'd said, my mother had abandoned us. And so I had been working since I was 12 years old. And all through school, I worked 3 jobs and went to school. And I became really good at that. And I loved working and I loved what I was doing. And that was when I began my career as a hairdresser. And I was working in a salon from the time that I was 15 years old. And working in that salon, I was able to see this whole completely different life. And I began really opening myself up to asking all of those spiritual questions. And I had moved to Texas to work for this international hair company. And while I was there, I met my ex-husband, who was also a hairdresser. And I was in this place of searching, looking for truth, so to speak. And I was really getting involved in a lot of spiritual books, reading a lot of Shirley MacLaine. I had started studying the power of crystals, and I was just in this really open place. And when I had met my husband, he was the first calm person that I had had this really great interaction and conversation with, who was an adult. I was 19 at the time, and so I'd had my high school sweethearts and that sort of thing, but he was an adult. He was a man. And I was very drawn to him because he had this gentleness about him. And we started dating right away. And later I learned it was because he was really involved in a religion, and he was very much trying to live a Christ-like life. And I found that so attractive. And so I got involved in this relationship with him. And the thing that I loved was that the religion that he was a part of was a way of life. It wasn't just something that they did once a week. It was this way of being, this way of making this a whole part of their life. And I was so drawn to that. And so I began this relationship with him. And I was so eager to prove that I was not my family. I wanted so much the opposite, that I created this sense of, this false sense of reality that I lived in inside my head. It was like this fantasy world that I had built up where I didn't want to see a lot of the red flags that were there, because I was so engrossed in creating this different world. And so my ex-husband was 15 years older than me. I was 19 and he was 34 years old. At the time, I was like, of course, because I'm so grown up and I'm such an adult. I'm 19 and I know everything there is to know. Naturally, I would be with a 34-year-old man. I think of it now, my daughter is 19, and I think that if a 34-year-old man came near my daughter, I probably would have a fit. But at the time, like I said, I was not awake. I was not aware. I was just living this life. And in this, I was in the, I'm going to prove myself mode. So we ended up coming together. Very long story. I won't get into all of the details. That'll have to be a whole nother show on
marriage,
on following your dreams, and when we give up our dreams and why and what that means. And because that's what that was. When I entered into this marriage, I had a vision and I had a dream. I had a mission. I knew exactly where I was going, what I was doing. I didn't have the words for it at the time, but I had my 5-year plan. Everybody in my high school knew, like, she's going to Texas, she's going to take over the world. I fast-tracked through the business that I was working for. I was put into the best salon, and they just saw where I was going because I was on a mission. I had that power and that drive, and getting into this relationship completely hijacked that. And he saw my power and he saw my drive, and it was like, he wanted that and he needed that. And I feel like he literally took it and sucked it out of me. And it shifted my focus to being 100% about him and focusing on his dreams and his goals. And that was a perfect experience with this new religion that I was part of, because I was learning what it meant to be a godly wife. I was learning what it meant to be what it was like to do it the right way. And the dynamic of the family dynamic relationship that was presented to me in the religion that he brought me into was so attractive. It was so beautiful. And even now, today, I think that is such an absolutely beautiful model of what a Christian marriage is. Unfortunately, that wasn't my marriage. It became more of a religious abuse. It was very much a very dysfunctional religious experience. And so my absolute desire to not be like my family, this was so different to be in this religious home, this like structured place, that I just kept staying in it because it was so different than the chaos that I was from, that it must be the right thing. It was the exact opposite, so it must be right. And so I stayed in that relationship for a long time, and the religion kept me there. And so after many, many, many years of counseling and therapy, he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And every time he got a diagnosis, we had to change to a new therapist because that therapist was off their rocker and didn't know what they were talking about. And it just kept going on and on and on. And so my coping mechanism was I became highly capable, highly functional. I became a workaholic. I became a parentaholic. I didn't turn to drugs. I didn't turn to alcohol. I wasn't like my family, but I worked constantly, and I focused so much of my energy and my attention into being a good parent, being both the mother and the father. By the time I was 25 years old, I had 2 children. I owned my own business. I owned my own house, and I was nominated Woman of the Year for the town that I'd lived in. And I was just going strong. And through all of this, everybody looked at me and thought I had the perfect life. They're like, oh, they're just such the perfect couple. They're doing so wonderfully. My kids were doing so great. I had such well-behaved children. And they just didn't see what was going on behind closed doors, where he wasn't violent with me, but the verbal and spiritual abuse was really intense. And because I was so shut down from reality, because I was so engaged in creating this persona, displaying for everybody to see this life, I didn't realize that I was doing exactly the same thing that I did growing up. Growing up in a chaotic family, we always had to hide from children's services. So when children's services would come to the door and knock on the door, we all had our script. We all knew what we were supposed to say. We all knew that if they find out the truth, then we're all going to be separated. That was always the threat growing up. And so I learned very much how to have that persona, that face of everything is wonderful and everything is great, while inside I'm really dying. And so I did that same thing as, clients would come into our business. They thought, oh, they're the perfect couple. But inside every year, I just closed a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, till I got to the point that I no longer existed. Only the persona that I created existed, and it wasn't real.
Incredible. And so
Yes.
you were literally carrying the whole load. You were doing everything for everyone, and you weren't doing anything for yourself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that's when you and I met, right around that time.
Yeah, it was a little bit after that. I had this moment of realization that I held 5 positions in my church. I was the women's ministry leader. I was the health and nutrition leader. I taught cooking classes. I was the children's division leader, and I was couples division leader. And I was also teaching a Sabbath school class every week. And so 5 different positions that I held in my church. I was running my business. My ex-husband and I had a salon together. I was literally taking care of everything. I was running my household. And all of this, I went to a women's retreat through my church. And I was there, and I just realized how different my life was than a lot of the women there. And there was a speaker who spoke, and they were talking about the difference of being a human doing versus a human being. And I remember sitting there listening to the speaker, and it just struck me that I was not a human being, that I was a human doing. And I had this huge realization of, oh my God, I can't continue living this life. I'm not going to make it. And that was when I really dove into starting going to marriage conferences. I really wanted to try and change the dynamics of my marriage. I really wanted to become healthier. And so I went through a lot of therapy. We went through a lot of different marriage conferences. Actually, I went to 5 different marriage conferences year after year, because we would learn all these tools, and it would stick for about 2 or 3 months before everything would fall apart again. And so I went to counselors, and it wasn't until it was around 2011 when I started working with you, and you would always speak this language when I would come and see you, and you would, I would just so resonate with everything that you said that I'd be like, my God, there's got to be something to this. Like, this is what I'm feeling inside, but I don't have words for. I don't know how to articulate. I don't know exactly what it means. I only know the biblical version of what it is that you're saying. And so it was through working with you that really opened me up to understanding this whole other way of dealing with your emotions. And it's very different than working with a counselor. I went to counseling for 12 years. And I think it was within 6 months of working with you and using the emotional processing that literally completely changed my life. It was like I woke up one day and I said, no more. I can't do this anymore. And I started to get a glimpse of who I was inside, that dead person that was living inside of me, like that little girl who wanted to come out and be expressive in my dysfunctional home. But I had this big, huge armor on of having to put on the face of everything is just wonderful and fine. And came to that place where I had to first admit everything's not wonderful and everything isn't okay. And people were shocked. It was amazing. Even my children were shocked. Even my own children who grew up in the household that they grew up in, I kept such a front that they didn't even know how abusive and how dysfunctional their dad was, because I compensated for it. I was the one that kind of went in there and created this relationship. And it wasn't until after we were divorced for almost a year, maybe like 6 months to a year, that my daughter came to me and she was like, after I'd spending the weekend with her dad, just like, I had no idea. Like she was just shocked to see who he was for who he was without me there creating the dynamic. And at one point she'd told me, she said, I'm so glad that you divorced Dad. I feel like you saved my life. And when she had said that, because there was a lot of guilt that I carried about having a broken home, because I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to be like my family. I wanted an intact family. And that was part of the reason why I'd stayed in my marriage for so long. But hearing my daughter say that to me was this huge release of knowing that although it's hard, being divorced is hard, and I don't recommend it to anybody. And you're hearing all of the bad parts, of the hard parts. There were some really beautiful parts in my marriage too. And my ex-husband is a really beautiful soul. And there are so many wonderful, beautiful aspects of him and who he is. And he's in a place right now where he's starting to develop and build a relationship with his children. And I'm so thankful. But it was really that moment for me that I realized that I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that I have done more than just save my life, but that I had broken a generational pattern that could have continued on and on and on had I not stood up, had I not decided no more. I have to be able to be a part of my life. My life has to be about me. It can't just be sacrifice. That I realized that I've created a ripple effect that is not only affecting my daughter's life, but will affect my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and my great-great-grandchildren. Because that was the moment that I stopped the cycle. The moment that I said, this is not how the story is going to end.
Is that one of the reasons why you're now coaching others, and why you decided to take a wholeness certification course through the Universal Wholeness Program that I offer? Is that the reason why you decided to take on, because this work was so powerful for you?
Absolutely. Everything that I've ever done in my life, I know that I am a teacher. And so everything that I've ever learned, I have this really wonderful gift of being able to articulate it in a way that other people understand. Being a codependent for so many years, I'm really good at reading people. I'm really good at listening to other people. I'm really good at being able to see what other people are feeling. I'm also an empath, and so I feel what other people are feeling. As a hairdresser, doing hair for 26 years, there's a natural therapist part of that business that happens where I am in a really intimate space with that person and they share so much with me. And I've always been wanting to share what it is that I learned because I become so excited about it. And if it can change and help somebody, that's why I'm here. That is why I've had the life that I've had. That is why I've gone through every experience, is because I have personally felt and experienced every type of pain, dysfunction, discomfort, anguish, and I have come through the other side and I know how to do it. And I want to help other people do it too. And their story is going to look different than mine, but the core wounds are the core wounds. And that every chaotic thing that happens in our life, we can transform it to love. And we have to feel it and we have to own it and we have to accept it before we can do that. And so absolutely, that is why I want to work with people. That is absolutely why I chose to become a life coach, because I want to do more than be the listening ear of the hairdresser that you spill your heart to, that I can give little tidbits of advice. I want to give tangible actions that you can do to change your life so that you can have the life that you love.
How do people get a hold of you, Charleen? Tell us how to get a hold of you.
Yes. So I'm currently, you can reach me through my website, charleenhess.com, and that is Charleen spelled with 2 E's together. And you can message me at livingwhole@charleenhess.com. So reaching out through me through email, you can just go to my website and connect with me through my website as well. My website is currently still a little bit under construction. I'm in the process of building my life coaching page, but you will see there my fitness coaching and my hairdressing page, and you'll be able to contact me and reach me through there.
Wonderful. So you're listening to the Kornelia Stephanie Show, and we're going to skip the break. We're going to keep going because, Charleen, would you believe that this hour is almost up? We have like 10 minutes left, and there's still so many things that I wanted to touch on, that I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm actually going to give you a choice on what is it that you really want to touch on more. So I wanted to talk about your fitness journey and what that means to you, and you can tell us about that. And then I also wanted to touch on, you just had an amazing weekend this weekend in Mount Zion, and there was an incredible experience that took place this weekend. And I thought, well, you go ahead and choose and pick which one of these topics that you want to talk about and then share with us.
Okay, thank you. So as a life coach, just because I'm a life coach and just because I've gone through and done all of this work for the last several years doesn't mean that you're done doing the work. What it means is that you have the tools to do the work. And so I had this really awesome experience this last weekend that I wanted to share. I went to Zion National Park with a bunch of my friends to celebrate my birthday, and we did this really awesome hike called Angel's Landing. And what a lot of people don't know about me is that I'm terrified of heights. I am really afraid of heights. But people see me all the time doing these grand adventures, and nobody would ever know because it's not something I advertise, because I don't want to identify myself as a person afraid of heights. Instead, I just always push myself just to that limit so that I can become a little bit more comfortable. Well, this weekend we were doing this hike, and it's the Angel's Landing hike. And the last mile of it is completely open and exposed. You have just 5,000 foot drop-offs on either side of you, and you have a chain that you can hold on to that tells you, don't fall off the edge of the rock. So I think it's there to try, so that you can hold on to it to maybe give you a little bit of visual barrier so that you don't completely feel like you're standing on the edge of a cliff, but really you are. And so I was doing this hike with all of my friends, and everyone's just super excited. And we got up really early, and I'm doing the hike, and I'm coming up, and I get to the top, and I'm like, oh, this is so great. And then I realize, oh, we're just taking a break. You mean this isn't the top? Oh, no, there's a lot further to go. So as we continue going up, the trail gets narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower to where you're literally walking on a ledge. And I came to this point where we all stopped. We all stopped to turn around and take a look to see how far we'd come. And I remember turning around and looking. And when I turned around and looked, and I saw that there is nothing around me but open air. And if I look down just slightly, it's an absolute complete drop off. And I literally froze. My body would not move. I pushed my back against the wall, and I slid down with my back against the wall because that made me feel safe if there was something against my back. And I sat there, and my sweet boyfriend tried to encourage me. And, are you okay? Do you need me to stay with you? And I realized this might be the top for me. This might be the top of the hike for me. I think I'm done. I sent him off so that I could sit there and be by myself. And I just sat there with absolute fear. And I was a little bit surprised at myself because I've never had this experience before where I'm literally physically paralyzed and I can't move. And so I sat there in that, and I just started to cry. I just had to release that energy, and I'm just sitting on the ledge crying. I really want to make it all the way to the top. I want to be there with all of my friends. I want to say I was able to do it, but I physically can't move. And it was at that moment when I completely released those emotions and I allowed myself to cry. Another couple came and they walked past me, and they're like, oh, hey, are you enjoying the view? And I'm, looking up at them, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm enjoying the view. I'm crying because I can't move. And then I had this realization that, same as I've had from the time that I was young, that no one's going to come and do this hike for me. A helicopter's not going to come and rescue me. No amount of encouragement is going to get me to turn around, to stand back up and make it the rest of the half a mile up. I had to go draw from what was inside, but I couldn't do that until I cried. It wasn't until I had to release those emotions. I had to release that. I couldn't pretend it didn't exist, because that's what paralyzed me from being able to make that next step. Yes, once I cried and released it, I was better. I was then able to turn around, stand up, and finish the rest of the hike by myself with completely open, exposed air beside me. And it was absolutely the most amazing hike that I've ever done in my life. And it was wonderful. And I'm just here to say that we have things that we face in our life all the time. And just because you overcome something once doesn't mean that you're not going to need to face it again. But you can have the tools to know how to face it so that you don't ever have to let your fears define you or to stop you from living your best life, whether it be afraid of heights, whether it be afraid of getting into a relationship or getting out of a relationship, starting a new job, leaving an unhappy job, whatever it is. There are ways that you can have everything that you want in life and make the decision to have and be that inner being, that person that you are, that you can take whatever chaos that you have in your life and you can turn it into love.
And that's a global galactic call for action, because we're here to tell you we're the models of showing that it's possible and that there is hope, and that with the tools, like you said, that people can overcome their painful pasts, and it doesn't have to take years and years of therapy, because these quantum shifts can happen on the ledge of a mountain. So what an incredible story. It's been a wonderful hour that we've spent getting a little bit more intimate with you and your incredible story. I'm so proud of you. I love walking beside you on this path. I love supporting you. I love seeing you soar. And I love us building the new earth together. And so this weekend, you and I are going to be at a retreat. So for anyone that's local and that wants to come and join us, we're imprinting our financial footprint for 2018, where we're going to be trailblazing the economy next year and bringing our money into our foundations, because money is our freedom. So if you want to hang out with Charleen and Kornelia this weekend, feel free to come and join us at the Center for Happiness in Anacortes. Go to my website at KorneliaStephanie.com. Look under retreats, and the information's there. It's $75, and we have the whole day with us. And it's just going to be an incredible grounding in of the new frequencies, the new energies, and giving you practical tools on what you're going to do next year with living your life in freedom and bringing the money into it. Isn't that, yes. We certainly have got the love, and now it's time to start bringing the money into it. And I'm looking so forward to having this experience and working with this group of people, this incredible group of people that we have this weekend. And of course, it's always amazing to have you there, because you are unstoppable. And so I'm excited to see what's going to happen for you, Charleen, in the next years to come. And it's just an honor to be with you. And so do you have any final words for our audience today?
Thank you so much, Kornelia. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and to share a little bit about my story and about my journey. And it's a very vulnerable place for me, because there is still that part of me that doesn't want anybody to know any of the bad things, but understanding that my vulnerability is my superpower. And I am living that and owning that and being here. And I just want to encourage everyone that's out there that you can be a human being, not a human doing, and face your fears, feel your feelings, walk through it, take your chaos and turn it into love.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. And so you are a wholeness coach. And so part of that happened because of the wholeness coaching program that I offered, I think it was 3 years ago. And if people are interested in becoming a wholeness coach, they can also find out more information on my website to become a practitioner, first for themselves. And then, of course, if they want to teach, be a coach, be a life coach. It's such a rewarding experience, isn't it, to watch somebody blossom into their amazingness and their greatness? Isn't it amazing, the life that we're living, where we are right now?
Absolutely.
And so it's Thanksgiving, so there's so much to be thankful for. We've got the vibe high. We're building the new earth. We're transcending the old programs. We're bringing our love and our forgiveness into everything that we're doing. And so it's just, there's so many things to be grateful for. The time is up, Charleen. So thank you so much for being here today. Happy Thanksgiving. See you Saturday. And thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Namaste. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Kornelia Stephanie Show, Wake Up to Love, your call to action. Tune in each week on Transformation Talk Radio. Kornelia's joy is to engage others in practical ways, showing us how to live in the new earth in harmony with our true nature. For more information on Kornelia and her extraordinary work, or to listen to past shows, go to her website at korneliastephanie.com.